All right, so recording is now in session, I believe, unless it's not. So good morning, everyone. Again, this is Daniel York with GSA. I'm the government chair of the IT Modernization and Management COI. We have a great presentation today from the Associates Program Project on ICAM, Identity Management, Identity, Credential, and Access Management. And then we'll get that started off. Stu, do you want to say anything before we pass it to our associates team?
No, Dan, and just to compliment the associates again for putting together a great session. And the white paper will be published shortly on the ACT-IAC website, but I think we'll see over the course of their presentation, the 5 different case studies, that this is really a very interesting capability. So back to you guys.
And with that, we'll pass it to the associates team. Go ahead, take it away.
Alrighty. So August 16th, 1995, a series of graphical web browsers known as Microsoft Internet Explorer is, of course, created by Microsoft. Fast forward to July 14th, 2021, at approximately 4:49 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a group of 5 members from ACT-IAC Associates class became the first Internet Explorers. Now, although Microsoft's Internet Explorer will be retired on June 15th, 2022, the information presented today by the ACT-IAC Internet Explorers will live on. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for your time in listening to the Internet Explorers project overview. We are happy to be presenting to the IT management and modernization community of interest today. Next slide, please. So content to be discussed today will cover introductions, our project background, takeaways and findings, as well as a question and answer session at the end. In summary, our team has produced a white paper that we hope you'll find informative. Next slide, please. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself and my fellow explorers. My name is Omid Malban with CGI Federal, and I'm joined by Kyle Carrick with the General Services Administration, Jordan Saltakis with Booz Allen Hamilton, who unfortunately is not with us today, Mary O'Connor with Agile Defense, and Virginia Mattingly with ECS. We represent the IT management and modernization community of interest for the Associates class of 2021, which, as you know, focuses on strengthening IT management and accelerating legacy IT modernization. Next slide, please. So the objective of our project sought to focus on identity credentialing and access management within the realm of IT management and modernization. And our team accomplished that through the creation of a white paper highlighting best practices and recommendations relevant to ICAM modernization projects. Today, agencies across the federal space are under immense pressure from senior management and cyber attackers to make identity credentialing and access management the centerpiece of nearly all their IT modernization efforts. Why would they be doing that? Well, serving citizens better, faster, and more securely, and ensuring their trust are crucial to ICAM's purpose. So before I say it again, what exactly is ICAM? Identity, credential, and access management comprises the tools, policies, and systems that allow an organization to manage, monitor, and secure access to protected resources. Now, the federal government, the US federal government, has long been working to enhance, standardize, and secure the identities of its employees, contractors, and its citizens. So not only does federal ICAM have a lengthy history, but its underlying elements have actually been taking shape for quite some time. One of the crucial elements in this development is the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 12, otherwise known as HSPD 12. Issued in 2004, it, quote, mandated a federal standard for a secure and reliable form of identification. Lessons learned from tragic events and emergencies such as 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina called attention to how governments lacking in identity capabilities hampered their ability to coordinate with each other and address incidents of terrorism. Essentially, HSPD 12 led the way for significant changes in the government's approach to identity. Now, more recently, President Biden's executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity signaled the government's decreasing tolerance for legacy and compliance solutions. Now, these new technologies and challenges bring about new security needs, so ICAM architecture must be re-examined as soon as possible. With all that being said, that is the reason we chose this topic for our project. From here, I'll hand it over to Kyle to discuss the next section.
We can jump over to the next slide there, Mr. Dan. Or no, yep, back one, learning objectives. Yep, sorry, thanks. All right, thanks, Hamid. So learning objectives, there's really two parts to this, and we'll go over it in more detail in subsequent slides. There's the objectives from the actual project itself, and then there's the objectives that surround that as part of the whole process. Now, in terms of the project, we really set forth to break apart and analyze different strategies that enabled government entities to modernize their current ICAM systems into a more mature and efficient manner for their purposes. And, especially looking at how that impacted end users and customers alike. So we look to gain insights through research and analysis, focusing on applicability to the United States government, as Omid alluded to, looking at what went well or what could be improved. And then there's the objectives that surround this project through its completion, most notably our involvement with the COI members and our larger ACT-IAC associates activities. Building relationships across the wider industry, this partnership with the COI is potentially just the start of our involvement. If the COI doesn't mind our company, we could participate in future events. So looking forward to building that relationship from here on out. And Dan, if we could jump to the next slide, project methodology. Thank you, sir. So project methodology. So what this really entailed was a good amount of research spanning over about 5 external organizations, which included foreign governments and the United States. We looked specifically at how these organizations were able to accomplish an ICAM transformation and laid out just exactly how they went about it. From there, we documented those case studies with a particular focus on the challenges, their approach, and the value-based results that they personally experienced. And then obviously the final deliverable is a white paper, as Stu mentioned at the beginning, is going through the ACT-IAC publication process and will be available on the ACT-IAC ITMM COI website. So jumping on to the next page or the next slide here, project details. So just wanted to give a little bit of highlights about the paper itself at a high level. As we discussed, we're looking at ICAM transformations and calling out lessons learned and best practices observed through these 5 particular case studies. In doing so, we analyzed a few key things, notably the challenges, opportunities for improvement, and the value-based solutions as executed by these foreign and domestic governments. And lastly, we looked at the similarities and differences between these unique solutions that were used to achieve digital transformation in ICAM technologies, and we documented them accordingly. And this image here on the right is a sneak peek at the header page of our white paper. So, looking forward to getting that distributed to the community at large. And so with that, I will ask to go to the next slide and kick it over to my esteemed associate, Virginia Mattingly, who will talk further about the case study details.
Esteemed, oh gosh, thank you, Kyle. To give a little background on each of the cases that we looked at, our team researched and analyzed 5 identity credentialing and access management case studies. We chose 2 international and 3 domestic cases to get a better idea of how US federal initiatives may differ from similar foreign efforts and pull a lesson learned from all of them. The first was in South Korea. The Ministry of Interior and Safety, in coordination with the Korea Minting, Security Printing, and ID Card Operating Corporation, quite a mouthful, they implemented a pilot program for safe, secure, and private digital driver's licenses that can be used for identification and authentication at all locations where physical driver's licenses are accepted. The program started at the agency level, supporting a limited number of requests to first refine the system and the processes, and it was subsequently scaled to support more and more government organizations with plans to make the digital driver's licenses available to the public, with a full initiative rollout planned for 2022. The pilot program demonstrated that both government users and public are really receptive to adopting digital driver's licenses as an alternative to the traditional physical ones. And this program, one of the highlights and main takeaways we took was that it required significant public-private partnerships to collaborate and communicate in order to effectively apply the technology to the best benefit of the public. In Mexico, the National Digital Strategy Coordination Team at the Office of the President of Mexico, in coordination with 32 state governors, digitized birth certificate issuance, making essential identifying documentation available anywhere, anytime. Similarly to the South Korean study, this project required extensive collaboration between public and private entities, including federal, state, local, and private financial service providers. This case also demonstrated some unique challenges because Mexico has a relatively more rural population with fewer and lower rates of internet connectivity and access, meaning the digital services can't realistically replace physical service locations in the near future, although this is accounted for in their continual development and outreach initiatives under the larger national digital strategy. The digital birth certificate program successfully provided clean, unified service that encompasses many multifaceted processes for the users, integrating services from numerous institutions into one interface. The initial rollout was fully completed in January of 2018, and the national government issued over 3 million birth certificates through the online portal by the end of that same year. I thought that was pretty impressive. Looking here in the US, Transportation and Security Administration identity verification does play a critical role in the commercial aviation sector. Accommodating the demands of rising air traveler volume, increasing resource constraints, and limited operational capacity will require TSA and international aviation regulators to automate manual and paper-based identity verification processes through investment in modernization. Facial recognition capabilities can be automated to improve the performance and security of TSA procedures by increasing assurance of traveler identity beyond what travel documents alone can provide. For example, these fraudulent or document credentials can be reduced by being less reliant on physical IDs or security checkpoints. TSA is currently in the process of implementing biometric facial recognition technologies with input from the Office of Biometrics and Identity Management. Efforts to implement pilot projects at checkpoints that authenticate the travel document checker process will provide insight into best practices and lessons learned. Improved security, operational efficiency, and passenger experience are expected outcomes after the investments are made and fully implemented. In another case, GSA partnered with the US Digital Service to modernize, simplify, secure users' personally identifiable information while providing secure access to public services online. Since 2000, USA.gov has been a hub of information for US citizens and residents across the public services to access public services digitally. But this service is really a directory where users are linked to siloed agency-specific websites with unique accounts and credentials required to access different services. Login.gov was proposed as the solution to disjointed ICAM architecture in the federal services customer experience. Login.gov acts as an identity credential provider, allowing partner agencies to continue using their own websites that users are familiar with, but can now utilize Login.gov for access management purposes. Login.gov successfully implemented a uniform ICAM architecture for participating federal agencies. The site continues to undergo iterative developments and modifications to ensure that it remains secure and useful to the public. And GSA continues to improve Login.gov. And in February of this year, GSA announced that it would be partnering with various federally funded agencies at the state and local levels to expand Login.gov's usage to a broader audience. In our final case study, GSA partnered with the US Postal Service to provide shared service that aims to provide personal identity verification credentialing for federal employees and federal contractors at established physical locations throughout the country. In response to growing demand for additional local credentialing centers, GSA and USPS partnered to implement the US Access Point Pilot Program. The pilot began in November of 2020, providing greater access to convenient credentialing centers by leveraging 7 Washington, D.C. metro area post offices as US Access credentialing sites. The program almost immediately produced impressive results. New and existing federal employees and contractors experienced uninterrupted customer service throughout the ICAM transformation and during the global pandemic, with approximately 5,000 federal employees obtaining new or updated credentials from post offices during the initial stages of the pilot. So that's a summary of our 5 cases, and I will hand it over to Mary for the next slide to go into more details about our lessons learned.
Thanks, Virginia. So some of the common themes and lessons learned that we identified while undergoing the research into ICAM implementation strategies are below. A brief overview of the 4. Safeguarding user identity, user data is a high priority. This builds trust, which is essential to user adoption. Pilot programs or starting small with one use case is a good way to learn as you go throughout a larger implementation. Continual improvement. Everything changes so quickly in the IT world that it's essential to keep developing and improving, especially when it comes to security measures. Infrastructure capability. This has to be addressed at each step of the way as new initiatives are undertaken to ensure it's viable, and will continue to support new offerings as it grows. Now to delve deeper into each of the lessons, if you go to the next slide. First, safeguarding user data. As I mentioned earlier, this strengthens public trust in the new system. Users won't feel comfortable putting their personally identifiable information into a system that they don't trust. Some of the ways in which the case studies that we looked at addressed protecting public or protecting user data include blockchain-based, self-sovereign identity and decentralized identity systems, federally regulated systems that overtook state systems or state regulated systems to provide a unified system across the board of security measures, the use of identity assurance levels, the use of universally unique identifiers, and regular audits of permission levels, and leveraging existing infrastructure in place from similar agencies. Now I'll hand it over to Kyle for the next lesson.
Thanks so much, Mary. Okay. So lesson 2, incremental implementation or pilot programs. So throughout all the case studies, we found that success was commonly obtained through incremental implementation, specifically through the use of pilot programs. So, this might not be news to most of you, but, we did find it commonly throughout. The pilot program allowed for a trial, if you will, to dip the organization's feet in the water before going all in on a particular solution. This provided the opportunity to iron out any wrinkles on a smaller scale while paving the way for a scalable solution and implementation throughout the 5 organizations that we looked at. So just briefly going through each of these case studies, with the South Korean digital driver's licenses, that program had 2 pilot programs under the Korean Digital New Deal. The first was a mobile ID card for civil servants at central government organizations. So this allowed for a small focused group of users to use their smartphones for identification and authentication for government administrative operations. So by doing this, it allowed them to run a trial for their, as Mary mentioned, their blockchain-based security platform called OmniOne. And as a proof of concept, the success of this trial for the civil servants is going to enable the government to expand their cooperation with smartphone carriers and makers and with cybersecurity institutions to, further improve the quality and safety of mobile ID cards. The second program under this initiative was making digital driver's license publicly available on the, they had an app called the Pass mobile application, which was basically identity authentication. And so this application's license saw moderate success. There on the upside, there was millions of adopters within the first few months. However, when something happens at an accelerated rate like that, there were limitations on where the license was accepted that hampered further adoptions. Now, we didn't look at this as a failure. We looked at this as, something that they learned by doing it through the pilot trial program. So they were able to, slowly introduce this new mechanism and then, allow these limitations to be sought out later on. Looking at the TSA case study, so in their biometrics program for civilian air travelers, it relied on pilot programs to iron out problems and ensure that there was a complete solution before it was presented to the public. TSA and Customs Border Protection, CBP, are currently implementing pilot programs at select checkpoints. And, the purpose of that is to test out the automation of the biometrics program to get insights into best practices before they roll it out, through the airlines and in partnership with them. Looking at GSA, obviously, as Mary talked about, USA Jobs and the US government. USA Jobs is the largest US government job site, and their integration with login.gov had so much success back in 2018 that it, continues to do so. With that said, it continues to refine and improve the site based on the lessons learned from their rollout of that platform. GSA released an RFI for further adoption and has announced plans to seek additional partnerships with more federal agencies to utilize the login.gov site. And then lastly, looking at the government of Mexico, they recognize the need for gradual implementation as well with their digital birth certificate initiative. Testing was required to appease diverse stakeholders. So, when you're working with Mexico's 32 states and the authorities, you have local government, federal government, there's a lot of stakeholders. So this incremental implementation helps kind of ease all of your stakeholders. I'm sure most of us here are aware of, when you have a lot of stakeholders, sometimes getting everyone to agree on something gets a little more difficult. So the incremental implementation allows for a more phased, slow moving direction towards solutions that more people are comfortable with, before going to a full out solution. So again, all of these instances took an incremental approach through a pilot program, which proved fairly successful in each story, and ultimately is leading to the increased adoption of the particular solution that they tested out. And with that, with that, I will pass it along to Omid. Dan, if we could go to the next slide.
I think this one actually may be mine, so I'll jump in
sorry,
here.
Virginia.
Although I wish my hair was as good as Omid's, I get it. So something I'm sure you're all familiar with, just like the pilot programs, is continual improvement. The importance of continual improvement was really evident throughout all of these selected case studies, and it's definitely applicable to IT management and modernization practices beyond those examined in this project. In our cases, continual improvement was especially important as it relates to maintenance and assurance of data privacy and system security. Governments need to continually improve and defend their systems and their contents from threats as technology available to malicious actors develops over time. Similarly, the needs of the public are ever changing, and governments need to continually develop solutions to support those changes. This was especially evident with the TSA pilot program. They started with facial recognition, but as new biometric technologies become available, they'll be more and more secure as they can get more accurate. So they'll want to continue improving there. And with the Mexican birth certificates, right now, only about a third of the people that would use those services in Mexico have regular access to internet. So as the demographics change, we expect that figure to go up, and there will be a lot more pressure put on that service. And hopefully they can transition more and more away from those physical locations and more towards that online service. But that's going to be a continual development that's going to have to happen over decades, because when it comes to demographic changes, those are much slower than what you would expect to see with security challenges. So the continual improvement a lot of times can be a challenge at the government level when it comes to funding, because if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. But these were the two main issues that we saw with continual improvement. Now I'll hand it over to Omid for another lesson learned.
Thanks, Virginia. All righty, so although the IT modernization projects we discussed, they frequently result in a transition from decades-old legacy system to the cloud, for an example, the primary focus, at least with our case studies, was to focus on enhancing the user experience. Other benefits from these modernization projects, however, are quite clear. For example, the increased infrastructure capabilities associated with these projects should be acknowledged. As you see on the screen, agencies, stakeholders, and all relevant parties must assess future upgrades made to existing infrastructure during all phases of their implementations, from planning to execution. And doing so allows for operations, data, and regulatory requirements to be satisfied. For example, the government of South Korea, they leveraged blockchain technology on an improved IT infrastructure. The application's use of blockchain gave users more control of their identity and personal information. The use of blockchain on improved IT infrastructure also allowed for users' identity and information to be stored on their personal device instead of a central server, further minimizing potential cyber threats. The government of Mexico established and implemented new data standards, traceability protocols, data governance standards, all to support interoperability. This allowed them to effectively assess the capability of their IT infrastructure that would be needed to support their main objective of easy access to identity documentation. And it also sets the stage for future opportunities when required. The Transportation Security Administration, they utilized biometric facial recognition technology to reach its ICAM objectives. But importantly, the machines themselves presented several benefits. They are easy to use, self-serving, and have anti-tampering features. Also, the improved IT infrastructure supporting those machines have capabilities that follow current and changing security guidelines set forth by the DHS or the TSA. Upgraded infrastructure will be intended to secure data, both resting and moving between IT infrastructure. And lastly, the General Services Administration, they recognize the value of integration. Multi-factor authentication was a key strategy to promote an integrative architecture. And this supported the permissions, verifications, audits, and other features of a central ICAM architecture for the login.gov case study. GSA also expanded credentialing capabilities with the help of existing biometric infrastructure through teaming up with USPS and their infrastructure with the USA Access Point pilot. So you can see that theme is pretty relevant in all four of the case studies we explained today. And with that, I think we're ready for our question and answer section on the next slide.
So there's already one question asked in the chat. I can read aloud, or you can read it yourself, whichever is easiest. But the question had to do with how you can apply these lessons learned to looking at integration with non-digital channels like a phone or in person. I don't know who on the team wants to take that.
I can start on that one because I focused on the Mexican digital birth certificate services. And that was a major concern because, like I said, a small portion of the Mexican population has regular access to internet. So looking at all these, the Mexican government had to account for people going in person, especially, or sometimes over phone, less so with this particular project. So that all comes back to continual improvement, where we look at, if they're going to try to do everything digitally, you have to kind of transition that, like a phased approach. You have to kind of do the change management to make sure that everyone that's going to be using the service is able to do it. So whether you're changing to something digital or making any other change, it really comes down to change management, I think, and that can apply at a higher level to things that are not only digital, but also in-person services or phone or email.
Great. Do we have anyone that wants to maybe come off mic and ask a question in a more dialogue setting?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you so much, associates. You guys did a great job. I was curious if there was anything that surprised you in the results, either something you were expecting that you didn't see or something that showed up that you weren't expecting to see.
That's a great question, Mara. You know, I think for the most part, most of, you know, for me personally, as you know, I was going through this, I was impressed with, you know, some of the foreign governments, you know, quick resolution and solution to some of these very, very important issues, with the Mexican digital birth certificates and the South Korean driver's license. I think there's not a lot of press on transformations like that. And so being a part of this project and looking into those two particular case studies, was really eye-opening. And just getting back to this as a whole, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from people that are doing implementations that, other people are doing, and they're just not as familiar with other, similar instances that are occurring. So, that was one for me.
And probably that they even responded and were so open and transparent. That might have been a bit of a surprise, I guess. It was a little bit to me in seeing the results. And I think it's great that folks are open to sharing.
Absolutely.
Great. Do we have any other questions, either on the phone or via chat? Folks are happy to come off mute.
Hey, Kyle and team, this is Stu. I did have one question. So, I know you guys mentioned that there was a real success achieved by doing the pilots. Did they share any of their, significant challenges that they had by doing these pilots, that they uncovered any, problems and as they kind of rolled out the capability?
Yeah, I think, and I'll just jump in here and I'll let the team, jump in as they please. But, from looking at it, there was a big consistency in, institutionalized policies that made it difficult for these pilots to take off, as we mentioned with Virginia's case study and the Mexican digital birth certificates. There's a lot of stakeholders, and that creates, difficulty in getting things done. And so, there was issues with that side of it. In terms of actual, the technical side of it, of course, there were some issues with infrastructure, having the needed and necessary infrastructure in place. These are decisions at the leadership level to get these pilots off the ground. They would have to, make business decisions saying, is that an investment worth doing? We don't know much about this. It's hard to fund something that you're not as familiar with, even though that's the whole point of the pilot, to get more familiar with it. And so it's kind of like this paradox that we saw throughout some of these case studies.
I will jump in. I'm glad you brought up that, because in the Mexican case study, it began with a pilot that was relatively small, but because they knew they wanted it to be at a federal level, the pilot actually, the feedback from the states completely restructured the entire project. They originally were going to, the way it worked before was that the states were responsible for setting the charge, how much it would cost for each person to get a copy of their birth certificate. And that was a source of revenue for the states. Well, the federal government created the study and looked into it and proved that the states would actually save money. So the loss of revenue wouldn't impact their bottom line, but the states still wouldn't sign on to it. So what they ended up doing is integrating with all of these different financial services so that the states could still set their own price and it would still be a part of their revenue, but it's all under one system. And so the birth certificates were issued at the federal level, but the payment and everything was determined at the state level, but it was all in one coherent interface.
I know for my particular case study, the Transportation Security Administration's implementation, I think one of the hurdles they ran into was their opt-in strategy, because these pilot programs operated on the basis that customers had to opt in, or they had to consent to having or using the biometric machines. So I can imagine it was met with a lot of criticism and pushback from people who didn't think their data might have been secure, or didn't want their face being used as a method for authentication. They want to maybe stick to their passport or driver's license, whatever ID they have. And that kind of touches on the topic of zero trust that we didn't touch on much, but it's a pretty fast growing modernization initiative today. A little info on that, it just assumes that the network is hostile. So instead of relying on a network to secure an organization's resources, it requires identities to constantly be verified in order to grant or maintain access. So I think that was an issue in my case study where we had customers that weren't comfortable or didn't want to use the biometrics as a part of their boarding process at airports.
And it looks like we've got another question in the chat about TSA. I think Kyle, was that your case?
I think that's Omid.
That was mine. So how did TSA and CPB avoid stovepiping of data with the network security requirements the equipment resides on? So because this case or this implementation is still ongoing, it hasn't really matured to its end game. They are still in the pilot project status with some airports and airlines implementing at wherever the stakeholders' needs are. So not too much on that yet. I'm sure it's the software development lifecycle for these projects is very stringent. It probably has a lot of testing and a lot of cycles to ensure that these security requirements can be met on such a large scale, because lots of air travelers, lots of flying takes place on such a frequent basis in this country.
Looking at the next question, if you were able to conduct a second round of interviews, are there any projects or countries you'd like to dig into? One thing that came to mind for me is all of these vaccination tracking programs, and this could apply to almost any country. Everyone's trying to do it digitally, and they're getting a lot of pushback because people don't trust anything digital, or they don't have access to anything digital, or the vaccination records aren't digitized or can't be digitized. And then there are a lot of efforts to have an international standard that relates, to what we're doing with TSA to secure flights, not necessarily in a traditional security sense, but to allow people to fly and not be at a higher risk of catching COVID. So I think that would be really interesting, but there's not a specific country that pops out to me.
Jumping off that, for me, there were some countries and some case studies that we found in our initial research that didn't end up making it to our final paper. So I would want to go back. For instance, we found a case study for digital driver's licenses in Argentina, and we just didn't include that. We focused more on South Korea, but I think branching out and finding similar case studies, for instance, the digital birth certificates and digital driver's licenses, other instances of countries implementing that would be something that I would be interested in revisiting.
I also heard just real briefly about Canada. Just speaking with the COI themselves, they had mentioned Canada would be a good one to revisit in their digital transformation. So Canada as well.
Sounds like a phase 2 of the project. Hint, hint, hint. We get the Digital Explorers band back together after graduation on Wednesday.
Absolutely, Dan. Hey, well, the Internet Explorers are here for the ITMM COI. So, this was one instance, but, happy to be involved in the future.
Great. Any other questions before we wrap it up? All right. Now I gotta find my right deck. So thank you to the Internet Explorers and the Associates program for putting this together. We will have a draft of the white paper on the ACT-IAC ITMM page later today, and then a final version once it's updated and approved by ACT-IAC leadership. So be on the lookout for that, and I hope you all enjoy reading as much as I have. Congratulations to Internet Explorers and concluding your Associates class debut. You've now gone through the entire program with a very successful project, And I think I was right in saying Wednesdays when you graduate at the membership meeting. Is that right?
I think it's actually Thursday.
Thursday,
and
I got the date wrong.
Nancy's chat, she has a link to the
There you go.
information on it. Yep.
So for folks that want to meet our Internet Explorers in person, that would be a great opportunity for you to do so. In terms of wrap up, our next COI meeting will be Tuesday, January the 11th. That's the second Tuesday in January from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern time. We have the distinct privilege of having Miss Maria Rote, the Deputy Federal CIO and the CIO of OPM guy, come and talk about the President's management agenda. So do register for that, and we hope to see you in early January there. I've also listed a group of projects that we've now wrapped up, and we're getting ready to kick off. So be on the lookout for emails in terms of signing up to participate and staff up or even lead some of the new projects there at the bottom of the screen. With that, Stu, I'll pass it to you for any parting words.
All right, thank you. Thank you again. Internet Explorers, maybe we'll call you Quantum Explorers because that'll be even more exciting next time. But just going into next year, I just want to emphasize that we do have a lot of interesting things. And so I know there's about 25 people on. Please get registered for the PMA. It's going to be really exciting with Maria and Guy. Also, as Dan mentioned, we're going to really continue on our digital transformation best practices, as well as project, and we're going to kick off our accelerating out of IT modernization processes project. Those are the two that we've got teed up right away. So look for those emails, and looking forward to jumping into next year. Thank you, Dan.
Great.
And thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, that concludes our meeting today. Thank you again, everyone, for dialing in. And we hope to see you January the 11th with Maria Rote.
Thank you all.
Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.